Hello everyone. Today I will start a discussion. So at the moment, I'm working on my Elder Scrolls Online review, which means that I had to take an extensive look into the lore of that game. And as of the last two expansions, Necrom and Gold Road, the main focus of the main story of ESO has been the new Daedric prince, Ithelia. And now that that story has concluded, I can safely say that, to me at least, she doesn't work. I'm gonna be very forward and honest. My complaints with Ithelia is that she doesn't look good, her abilities and the concepts that she introduces are never explained, the things that are explained about her make no sense with regards to ESO lore itself, and also other test games, and also her quests are really bad. Before I talk about any of these points, I want to explain to you who Ithelia is. Now, Ithelia was the eldest of the Star Orphans. The Star Orphans are Magna G, meaning they are the children of Magnus, the architect of the world. And when Magnus felt that his power was being sapped to create the world, he left Nirn by piercing the sky and oblivion to reach Aetherius, and his children, the Magna G, followed with him, thus creating the stars. The Magna G are complicated figures in the world. You might know Mnemoli, the blue star, the bringer of the untimely. In the book The Nine Coruscations, it is stated that she, quote, saw the harmony of Anuel and Sithis and the union of opposites. She was the white star, queen of fates unwritten, the madness of the time god, Akatosh, and the first challenge of his shadow, who in nothingness saw those endless possibilities first. She condemned Akatosh's actions and his madness, and she viewed linear time as a worse alternative to the infinite possibilities it concealed. Thus, she hated Akatosh, and through the denunciation of the time god, and her cleaving through linear time and creating infinite possibilities, she reached Numantia, new law. It is a state by which a being elevates itself above its current circumstances, and through this process, Ithelia went from being just a star orphan to becoming a full-on Daedric prince. So far so good. Now, what if I told you that absolutely none of this is mentioned in the main story of ESO? None of it. The story in ESO picks up from the point where Hermaeus Mora sees her, condemns her for being too unpredictable and quite possibly able to destroy the world, and then imprisons her forever. And in this process, he also deletes everyone's memories of her. Now, initially I was gonna give a spoiler warning prior to saying all this, but given that the story in ESO is delivered very badly, I instead choose to say, you're welcome. You wanna see the questing in ESO? Okay, I'll show you the questing in ESO. Here. 100% of ESO questing lies right here before your very own eyes. Can you see it? It's this. Ithelia's story in ESO is that she gave one of her followers a tiny bit of memory of her before Hermaeus Mora wiped out any memory of her from everyone else's heads. That follower, for the entirety of Necrom, tries to figure out what that memory means and how to bring Ithelia out of her imprisonment in Apocrypha. First, I'll start with the actual aesthetics of Ithelia. In her cinematic, Ithelia looks like this. Now, in-game, Ithelia looks like this.
I remember so little about myself. Why is that? Did someone... Yes. Mora, he did this.
Zenimax, please. Buddy, we're still at the character design point where the hair is glued to the character's body. Therefore, every time she moves her hair expands and contrasts along with her. And her facial animations are just soulless. I like the fact that she has fragments of broken glass as wings, but that's basically the only thing I like about her. Now, you would think that with such a concept as a new Daedric prince, and also with her being plastered all over this expansion, she would have been the main point of this expansion. However, she barely shows up at all. First of all, the entirety of Necrom was building up to her, and not once did she make an appearance there, so that's gone. Then, she doesn't even appear during her prologue quest, and instead she escapes before we can reach her prison, and then we get to the 7 quests of Gold Road, in which she appears once briefly during the first quest, once during the second quest in a flashback. She's present in the entirety of the second half of the third quest, but as I will talk later, that is also the worst quest in the quest line, so maybe it would have been better if she didn't appear. In the fourth and fifth quest, she appears sporadically until the end. She barely appears throughout the sixth quest, and then we see her again in the final battle of the seventh quest, in which battle she's not even the final boss. And throughout all of this, she has absolutely zero character development. Ithelia, can you please tell me a bit about yourself?
I am Ithelia, the Daedric Prince of Paths, the mistress of the untraveled road. I am... confused.
Yes, I know, but I cannot relate to you. I don't know who you are, please.
I remember the armies of the other princes pounding on the doors to my shrine. My loyal Shardborn readying their weapons. The sounds of unrelenting battle. I recall the princes standing in judgment over me, Then, blackness.
Alright, let me paint a picture for you. You have a Magna G10 Daedric prince that has amnesia, roaming the world, not knowing who she is. There are 1,000 avenues you can take that. There are so many potentials for intricate discussion. None of that happens, however. Instead, she's by all means a side character in her own main story. Her servant appears all throughout Necrom, he has way more runtime than her, and he's also the actual final boss. When Ithelia shows up, she says one of four things. Either she says, "Who am I? What's happening?" Or she loudly proclaims who she is, which we already know. Or she curses Hermeus Mora. There's a fourth thing she says, but I'm saving it up because that's the really bad one. My problem with this is that they could have written so many different things for her. Because Yasuo fills the quest with useless dialogue and B-plots that lead nowhere. In order to excuse the prices of these chapters, her character is lost in sieges that never really mattered and forests that grew up out of nowhere. How should I explain Ithelia's quest? I know.
An analogy, perhaps.
Okay, so imagine that for the first half of the Shivering Owls DLC, we were actually chasing after Haskell, the butler. And then for the second half, Sheogorath would only show up sporadically until the end, and when he would show up, he would basically say, "Oh my god, I'm like so sad, curse the other Daedra that did this to me, Jigalag is gonna come and kill me, I am Sheogorath, the god of madness." By the way, did I mention that I'm Sheogorath, the god of madness? I don't think I mentioned that enough. Imagine if Sheogorath never built his character, never said anything beyond this, and furthermore, imagine that when Sheogorath would say something else, it would completely contradict already existing lore, leading us to the fourth thing Ithelia says: contradictions and complete disregard for all existing lore. I could explain to you what I mean by this, but I feel like if I just showed you, it would be a lot more effective.
We learned that every Ithelia is dangerous. A broken creature that ends up hunted. We cannot change who we are. But mortals, you choose your paths. You don't need the powers of a Daedric prince to alter your fate. I envy this.
I stand here, in this place, in this moment, not because I wish to, but because I have to. A result of action and consequence. The prisoner must apprehend two critical insights. First, they must face the reality of their imprisonment. They must see the determinative walls, the chains of causality that bind them to their course. The prisoner must see the door to their cell. They must gaze through the bars and perceive that which exists beyond causality, beyond time. Only then can they escape.
She completely nullifies the concept of the prisoner, the reason why Lorcan created the world, the nature of fate in this world, and even Sotha Sil's dialogue. And what is more is that, theoretically, this could work. Mnemoli works, Dragon Breaks work. Well, the modders made Mnemoli work, but theoretically, Ithelia could work. But instead of cutting and tailoring this topic to something resembling an Elder Scrolls plot, they just ripped off the multiverse theory. I'm getting back to the second half of the third quest. In that part, we're sent to parallel universes, different paths, to collect certain ingredients to make a potion for her. In those parallel universes, the only real thing that changes is her perception towards her imprisonment. In one universe, she accepts it, in the other universe, she's angry about it, and in another universe, she just blows up the world because of it. Not only that, but because they shoved the multiverse theory into the Elder Scrolls without any real attention or care, it ends up contradicting itself almost in a comedic fashion. So throughout the second part of the third quest, it is always stated that no matter the alternative path, Ithelia will always be a danger. But then, during the seventh quest, they clearly put themselves in a corner, and so to get rid of her, they come up with the ingenious idea of just shoving her in a universe where Daedra are harmless. Therefore, that means that there are an infinite amount of universes where Ithelia is not an issue. See what I mean? The multiverse theory doesn't work. On one hand, it tells you that there is an infinite amount of alternative paths out there, and on the other hand, it tells you that the paths are limited enough to the point that it just benefits the plot. And what is worse, nothing about the many paths is explained in any way whatsoever. Here is Ithelia trying to explain the many paths.
Picture a diamond that somehow formed around a spiderweb, interweaving lines within a grander fixed shape. That is the many paths.
What does this mean? You just said nothing. Now here is Ithelia's servant trying to describe fate.
Can you contemplate what happens when reality shreds like parchment beneath a saber cat's claws? Nothing remains when existence ceases to be.
Now you're just making stuff up. Oh, they're just being esoteric. They're just being mysterious. No, they're not. I genuinely believe that at this point, they don't know what they're talking about. And I will prove it. But before I do, I just want to note that I am genuinely not an Elder Scrolls lore elitist. I don't think that the franchise's story went downhill ever since Michael Kirkbride left. And I don't think that every book should be as complicated as Mysterious Akavir or 36 Lessons of Vivek. I really think that there should be a window for simpler stories. All I'm saying is, when you're trying to say an esoteric story or something complicated, you should know what you're talking about. And I am sorry to say, but I genuinely have come to the conclusion that they just don't know what they're talking about. I genuinely think that they just wanted to make an Elder Scrolls multiverse theory, and they just didn't know how to do it, and so they ended up fumbling all over the place. First of all, the concept of the many paths doesn't work. If you remember, Akatosh's own existence creates a linear time. Therefore, it would be a lot more logical if Ithelia's realm, Mirror Moon, was a reflection of those infinite paths. Instead, they made it so that her realm is just a bunch of glass, and out of nowhere she can just access the infinite paths anyway. Even though it is specifically stated that Akatosh's own existence undoes the many paths, which means that for every path, there has to be an Akatosh. Yet we just stated that Akatosh, linear time, contradicts the many paths. There may have been an explanation for this, but they just said screw it and left it hanging. When you don't explain something and just have it contradict everything else, it doesn't make it esoteric, it makes it confused. Another big point that they harp on, especially throughout the last two quests, is the point that Daedra never changed.
A nice thought. But I am Daedra. I cannot change. And once the madness comes upon me, I doubt you will be able to contain me again.
Oh yeah, Daedra would never change. Except of course this guy and this guy and this guy and the Daedra of change. Other than those cases and a bunch of others, Daedra never change. Where did they even get that idea from? It sounds like they just came up with this idea just because they thought it might sound cool. Another point that I want to mention, and it's more of a my complaint, is that every prince that has something to do with fate does so because they are the Daedric prince of a completely different thing, which brings them back to being aligned with fate. Hermaeus Mora is a great example. Because he has access to so much forbidden knowledge, he's able to more accurately predict the future. Thus, he's associated with fate. Another great example, although less obvious, is Jigolak. Because he had perfect understanding of everything, he could establish perfect order. And when he did, he concluded that for there to be perfect order, he would have to take control of all the other Daedra.
The Great Library was the height of logic and deduction. Contained within its walls were the logical prediction of every action ever taken by any creature, mortal or Daedric. Every birth, every death, the rise of Tiber Septim, the Numidium, everything, all predicted with the formula found within Jigolak's library.
And Azura, because she's associated with the concept of prophecy and inevitability, is also associated with fate. Wouldn't it be like a lot cooler if Ithelia was the Daedric Prince of Defiance, as through her defiance of Akatosh, she could access the infinite paths? That'd be so much better. Instead, she gives this weird nonsense speech about the nature of the Daedra.
When we walked the many paths at the Outcast Inn, we visited realities where things had gone another way. I am different in those realities. But that is not choice. That is consequence. The aftermath of alternate events.
What does that mean? No, please, someone tell me, what does that mean? Is everyone just a prisoner? And also, didn't they ramble on about how she's able to change destiny? What was that all about? But I digress. When I make one of these videos, I try to give as much benefit of the doubt as I possibly can. I try to look at as much material as I can in an attempt to make sense of it. And even now, if someone were to explain to me how this garble works, I would be like, okay, I get it, and maybe make a correction on a future video. So, with all that being said, during the second half of the third quest, as I mentioned, you go in different parallel paths and meet different Ithelias. Behind those Ithelias, there are a bunch of books. It is, for all intents and purposes stated, throughout the main quest, that Ithelia's disappearance happened during or before the Merethi era. She is constantly seen in Eliot ruins, it mentions that the Eliots worshipped her, and every single one of her artifacts is found in Eliot ruins as well. She even mentions that her imprisonment happened eons ago. So, back to those books from before she was banished. The first book I accessed was Cold Harbor, compact. A book written in the middle of the First Era. I'm like, okay, this is odd. Now, after seeing the second book, I have come to the conclusion that they either don't know what they're talking about or they are doing things completely at random. Because the second book in an Eliot ruin during the time of the Eliots is Song of Pelennor, Volume 6. For those of you that don't know what this means, it's basically like walking into an ancient Celtic ruin and finding books written during the late Roman Empire. Either they have no clue what they're talking about anymore, or they just place this here randomly. My biggest fear after all this is that they won't abandon this concept and they'll just keep throwing more nonsense on top of nonsense. Which brings me to my final point. So, to give a brief recap. During the events of Elder Scrolls 3, it was believed that all of Cyrodiil was covered in jungle. However, during the Elder Scrolls 4 and 5, it was established that Talos deleted the jungles of Cyrodiil after his victory over Eleanor as a way to thank his fellow Imperials from the present and onward. However, when ESO kicked in, Cyrodiil was still not a jungle. They're trying to throw around a few nonsense excuses like, oh, mistranslation. But then it was stated that Tiber Septim deleted the jungles not just from the present, but from the past as well. Since he can manipulate the dream, he deleted the jungles throughout all of history. But then Gold Road kicks in, maximum speed and everything, jumping out of the window and out of the passenger seat, going, there were jungles in Cyrodiil after all. In this small, inconsequential part of the West Weald. To which I respond, if it's inhabited by Bosmer, why would it bother the Imperials so much that Talos would want to delete it? And also, why is it clearly stated then that all of Cyrodiil was covered in jungle? At this point, when someone asks me what happened to the jungles of Cyrodiil, I'll just go, I don't know, like I genuinely don't know. All of this brings us to one question. Why are they doing all this? Before I answer this question in what I perceive is the answer, I need to answer, why am I asking this question? I am not asking this question because I want to be toxic. I am not asking this question because I have my own version of the lore and I don't want anyone else to infringe upon it. And I am not asking this question because I hate ESO either. I genuinely was hyped for Ithelia. Questions like, why are they doing this? Why is this happening? Or why is this part of the lore written so badly? Inevitably arises when, you guessed it, something is written badly. And my answer to why is this written so badly is the following. First of all, the structure of ESO questing. It sucks. Slow dialogue, follow the compass, useless B-plots and side objectives, and nonsense used to expand the runtime and maybe warrant the expensive price tag. And also, a lot of carelessness. I feel like they were inspired by all the multiverses to create their own pseudo-Elder Scrolls multiverse. It fell flat, and I feel like meshed in all this is another factor, appealing to casual players. Terms like Magna G, Numantia, Akatosh's concept of time, escape of Magnus, they are all very difficult topics. And it seems to me that in order to make all this more palatable to newer players, they completely disregarded all of these topics, which, mind you, is not a bad thing. It is only a bad thing when you decide to tell a story that requires knowledge of all these topics, but you don't mention them, completely ignore them, completely disregard them, and so you end up with a mishmash that looks like this. Ithelia story, completely unassuming, badly told, badly executed, and in my opinion, it doesn't work. If you have anything to say about all this, please leave your opinions down in the comments. And with all that being said, I'm gonna go work on the ESO video. See ya later, bye.